Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing soul coming to us from the US. We have Lowell Johnson on board today. Lowell Johnson's journey has been anything but ordinary. At 67 trips around the sun, Lowell gained a clear sense of self, realizing the illusory nature of the third dimensional world. Like many on a path of awakening, he found himself embracing the ascension process, joining the ranks of countless lightworkers seeking higher truth. What sets Lowell apart, however, is the extraordinary experience that unfolded in 2020 on the slopes of Mount Shasta. During a hike, a portal opened and he was invited into the subterranean city of Telos by an 8-foot tall Lemurian named Alex. Telos, a thriving city of 1.5 million beings, is home to ancient Lemurians who retreated to the inner earth thousands of years ago, focusing on their spiritual development to become radiant, physical, immortal beings. Lowell's journey in Telos wasn't just an encounter with extra-dimensional beings, it was a reunion with those who have lived on Earth long before recorded history. The experience raised his vibration and gave him insights that transformed his life. Now, as a protector of Gaia and emissary of Telos, Lowell shares the lessons and truths from his time with the Lemurians. His mission is to inspire humanity with the knowledge that these beings, hidden yet ever present, are waiting to reconnect with us. Lowell Johnson has appeared on Gaia TV's A Journey into Telos, Interview with Extra Dimensionals with Ruben Langdon, and on many other podcasts, and is the author of the books The Example, One Man's Journey into My Multidimensional Realms, and Images of Inner Earth, an illustrative journey through what's around you dimensionally, and Inner Earth Beings, Children of Gaia, Connected to the Light. Now, today's story, we're going to talk about an event that happened at Mount Shasta. And for those that don't know the location of where Mount Shasta is, it's located in Northern California in the Cascade Range, about 40 miles south of the Oregon-California border. The legend of the mountain includes stories of angels, spirit guides, UFOs, and ETs. Ricardo Gonzalez, the Peruvian contactee, has had organized, successful program sightings on 8 occasions there, and UFO researchers Grant Cameron and Paola Harris have had an interesting contact story with a being called Antiarel there also. I always wanted to delve into that place's history, so when I heard of Mr. Johnson's story, I knew I wanted him on. So, Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. I got to say up front that Shasta was not on my radar when the decision was made for me to go visit. This was 5 months into COVID, and lockdown had been relaxed a little bit, so you were really stuck from where you were. And my intent wasn't to head to Shasta at all. I just wanted to get out in nature. And from where I was in California, to head toward the Southwest, where there are tons of national parks to choose from. Really, that was what my intuition was guiding me toward. And so when I started to do a little bit of research on social media about the condition of the national parks, there were lots of questions on whether they were even open at all because of staffing issues and anything that had gone on with all of what was going on around the pandemic. Anyway, the very next thought in my head was Mount Shasta. I'd driven by it a few times, but I'd never been there. I think I'd heard some stories about it, but really didn't pay any attention to it. But it satisfied the idea that it was outside, forest area, mountainous, and it was from where I was in Santa Rosa, really 4 hours. So I could get there in a morning or an afternoon, and didn't really know what I was going to. So I'll stop and take a breath if you want to set this up any further, but I just wanted to kind of lead people to how I got there in the first place.
Before we get into your story, is it safe to assume that growing up you were a sort of free thinker, a dreamer, somebody that that questioned authority or that questioned everything?
It's funny you say that. It took me a while to kind of come to terms with a lot of things, because when you're growing up, you're conditioned by school, family, church, all of the things around you. And there's very little free thinking that you really wander off to go do. And so the idea, first of all, of reincarnation is a foreign thought to you that really hasn't been introduced and really it hadn't been lodged into me as though this is real. Although, the more attention I gave that topic, the more it seemed like it was at least possible, if not likely. And so then when you start to study what reincarnations are really like, and you have an opportunity to have somebody help you through past life regressions, then you can kind of begin to put this all into perspective. That's when I realized that I really chose my last incarnation. We get to choose the circumstances we come back here and the lessons that we sign up to learn. So when you were asking about my upbringing, it's interesting because I had never really looked at it that way before. But I can tell you this, that I didn't come into this incarnation planning that I'd need a lot of parental guidance. Because my father, by the time I was 4 years old, and he had two other kids younger than I was, so this was 1958, Dad got custody of the kids. Yeah, that don't happen. And my mom kind of disappeared. So from a parental unit, I grew up with my grandparents until I was 11 and my father remarried, but I didn't have a lot of interactions with my dad then. He was still a young man living his life and, trying to support a family. So I understood it all. It wouldn't be until later in my life that I didn't really understand not having a mother and not really relying on my parents for a lot of advice, which, I could see in the households of lots of my friends. That wouldn't really make sense to me until much later in my life. Then I would understand more about the reasons I took the directions that I took. It wasn't that I wasn't going to be indoctrinated into the church, because certainly my grandparents were interested in having that opportunity for me. And so I was always fascinated with something higher than myself. And I was aware and believed that there was something greater than that. But I didn't know that after I went through the regimens in church, that I had the right appreciation for where I was being guided in the church on what to believe. And the first kind of faux pas that I had was in my church, which was a Protestant church. By the time you get to seventh and eighth grade, you're in confirmation class. So these 2 years, you're going to train and you're going to learn what you need to learn so that by the time you're the equivalent of a freshman, you're old enough and eligible to join the church. So here's your training before that. To me, and I'm a pretty smart guy, have a pretty good level of intellect, but memorizing the books of the Bible was a task for me. Somehow, when I needed to demonstrate it, I mumbled my way through it, but I can tell you for certain I couldn't repeat it again. And the thing is, I didn't understand the necessity of it. You want me just to remember the titles of the books of the Bible in order, and what's the reason for that? So when I couldn't come to terms with that, that's when I started to lose interest on the other things that the church was trying to teach me, because I couldn't get past this part. As time went on and you got exposed to other things, especially when I was spending time in nature, that's really when connections to things higher than myself started to happen. And me, like a lot of people I'm hearing from now, just shut that down. Didn't know what it was. Don't really think I can talk about it with family and friends. So it's probably smart to just put that away for now until a point comes, like Jan, that you can't ignore these unsolicited things that keep placing themselves in your path. People, circumstances. And then, by the time we got to Telos, acceleration got to a whole nother level, because by now, I'm no longer distracted by work. I'd taken a consulting job in Baton Rouge in late 2018, mid 2018. And I was going to help through a transition for this casino property that's bringing their gaming on land from a riverboat. But about halfway through 2019, like in June, I'm getting this sense. Now, I'm already 2 years into my meditative state, found that, and that's working for me. Something's nagging at me beginning in June that I'm supposed to be elsewhere, doing something else. Now, I'm making a pretty good living where I am and getting paid pretty good, but something by the beginning of December, I make the decision that I'm going to quit, resign. I'll give them 6 weeks, and then there's somewhere else I'm supposed to be. So beginning of that next February, which would have been 2020, here's where the acceleration all began. Telos will be at the end of July. Once, as I described, I'd made the decision to go there. It was the day or two after the 4th of July. And I did that intentionally just to avoid the holiday. The intent is to go for a week and maybe two, and then maybe hook up with my son nearby in Tahoe or Reno because nobody's working. There's plenty of time to just get out and hike. Well, to make a long story short, I stayed there for 5 weeks before I had to go back to Santa Rosa, or I would have stayed. I just found some kind of groove, Jan, that I didn't want to leave. Whatever the vibration was there was so infectious. You just wanted to stay in it. And so upon looking back at all that time and the timing when I was invited to go into Telos, I don't know that I had a low vibration when I got there to begin with, because I was sensing energetic things when I got there to begin with. But I suspect that over those 4 weeks I was there, that my vibration, my frequency, unbeknownst to me, was being tweaked a little bit at a time. Get used to a little bit higher vibration every day that you're out there in the woods, and all you wanted to do the next day was just return and go do it again. So by the end of it, I'm pretty certain that now that the way I look at it now, that my vibration had been adjusting while I was there on the mountain to a level that I was going to match the frequency that I was going to be invited into. That makes sense?
Wow. Now, were you drawn to a certain part of the mountain?
Um, there's a place that I like to go to. So I guess the answer to that is yes. I explored all around it, and there's other areas around there that feature waterfalls and other things. So you can go to McLeod, and there's 3 different sets of unbelievable waterfalls there. You can go toward Mount Lassen. There's Pluto's Cave, which is nearby. There's lots of things to see. And really, in the first 4 weeks that I was there, I rarely went to the same place twice. I wanted to explore it all. And what I also didn't really appreciate until almost the second week in is I was going out and hiking every day like I was in my early 20s. And changes in elevation, all of that went with it. What I learned the first day I went out to hike is that for whatever reason, I was directed to go downhill in this one area. And so at the end of the day, when you're a little more tired, that's when you realize now I got to climb back uphill. And so future hikes might be smart, Lowell, to do the uphill first part, and then you'll find it easier to go downhill. There is a place when you come out of Mount Shasta. It's called Lake Street, but Lake Street turns into what's called Everett Memorial Drive. From downtown to the highest point which you can drive, with there's 3 levels of parking there. It's about 11 miles. And now you're at almost 9,000 feet of elevation. Town's at about 3,500. So here is the spot I love to go to the most because there are multiple trailheads from that location. But my favorite is Old Ski Bowl Trail. So apparently long ago, this was the site of a ski slope on this side of the mountain. There's still a ski slope and a facility on the opposite side. But in the early 90s, that had all been taken out by an avalanche. And so when you look at the mountain from this perspective and you see how it kind of looks bare, here's the reason why. All of whatever trees and rocks were all moved down considerably. And so there's been growth since then. But now when you understand that that dynamic took place, you can see where it took place. Well, as I was moving around the mountain, these were the more energetic places I was finding. And I didn't really know what I was looking for. All I could tell you is that I felt differences in the places I was going to visit there. And it turns out that I was stumbling across vortexes. And within some of these vortexes, you can find portals that will, under the right circumstances and under the proper vibration levels, you've just opened a gateway to visit somewhere else, whether that's somewhere else in the mountain, whether that's somewhere else in this dimension, that's all up to you. But I'm probably getting ahead of myself with some of your listeners suggesting that we're going to launch off into other places when we're just talking about inner Earth.
So, okay, let's talk about the event itself. So what happened that day?
I had, well, it was a weekend. So I want to kind of brush through the weekend first so you can understand how I ended up where I was. There were two places after the month that I had not explored yet. One was a place called the Gateway Peace Garden. And I don't know why I hadn't found it before, but here's this delightful little place that is meant to be kind of a place of worship where you can see tons of these freedom banners that have been hung, lots of them. And when you see this from the street side, you wouldn't imagine that this little place has as much energy and is as vast as it is, but there's a lot of energy that is here. From this point forward, anytime I'm going to meet anybody to hike, we're going to meet here first because this is a great place to begin. So that was what I planned to do that last weekend. So that was Friday. And when I was finished there, I decided that I was going to go back up to that area that I just described, go to the top of that parking lot. And there were 4 concrete picnic tables up there. It was about noon by the time I got there. And I sat and I started to look back at the mountain. Now I had passed on the left-hand side, there's a couple other mountain peaks. There's Shasta immediately in front of you, from where my perspective is. There's Shastina, her little sister right next to her. And then there's Black Butte, which is separate, but still off to my left. Now, Black Butte to me looks like, when you see it from the road, it's covered with just scree. And it's almost like you just blow this stuff off. And underneath it, the peak of it looks like the tip of a crystal to me. And so my belief is that Black Butte is there to amplify the energy that comes from Shasta and broadcast it. That's how I feel. So I wanted one of these weekend days to, I heard that you can hike all the way to the peak. I thought, I'll do that one day. It's like 6,900 feet, so it wasn't impossible. I had read some accounts of people that had done it online. Half of them were delighted with it, and the other half said, don't do it. I should have listened to the half that said, don't do it, because when I suggested it was scree, that's just that loose rock. And there wasn't really even a path going up where you wanted to go. It was like 2 steps up, slide back 1 step, and continue that way. And I was hiking alone, which wasn't a great idea to begin with. Anyway, from that point, that noon on Friday, I had decided that Saturday, I was going to do the Black Butte hike. And then Sunday, I would come back to revisit where I'm sitting. Because as I'm sitting here looking back at Shasta, when I'm looking at Shastina over on her left, the sun is almost overhead. And the shadows it's casting looks like there could be some possible like cave openings over there. That's kind of what it looks like to me. So from where I'm sitting, it's maybe a 35 to 40-minute hike to get there. And not that hard. I can kind of see a path that nobody seems to be going on nearby, but there's going to be parts of it that's going to be off road, and that's fine with me. So Saturday, when I get up, I decide I'm going to go take the hike to Black Butte, which is beautiful. The views from up there were unparalleled. However, I started at the trailhead at 10 and got back to my car at quarter after 4. And it took me longer to get down than it took to get up because it was just exhausting. By the time I got back to my room, I had already in my mind made up my mind. I was just going to sleep in the next day. I hadn't done so the entire time I was here. Let's just lay in bed and we'll chill from there. We can go back and revisit that anytime, but that's just kind of the way I felt. Well, I get up every morning regardless, a little before 7, and it's my nature to meditate immediately. I do that for 20 minutes. And in this case, I was just going to roll back over and go back to sleep and rest for a while. Well, as it got closer to 9 o'clock, my intuition's like kicking me in the butt saying, get your clothes on, get out. So that's exactly what I do. And regardless of how tired I thought I was the day before, that seems to be secondary information. So by 11:30, I'm back to the top of the mountain. Now, you have to appreciate this part of Shasta is very popular. There's lots of people that go there. So there are families and couples. And the parking lot, I was lucky to find a spot to park. But there's a lot of people around here. Most of them are going off toward other trailheads behind me. But there are a few that are going up Old Ski Bowl Trail, not in the direction I'm going to go, because I'm going to go left where no one seems to be going. They all want to gain elevation in that direction. So as I start to move over toward the areas that got my attention, I started to move off the path and off into some areas where it almost seemed like this was intentional, where you'd see like a tree growing with a circle of rocks around it. And how can that be? Wait a minute. This is an avalanche area. So it's not like anybody planted that tree here and put the rocks around it. So there's something other energetically that's influencing this kind of growth. And as soon as I noticed this, I could feel energy changing from emitting from this place. It won't be until later, because each time I go back to visit Shasta in the future, I'll find these energetic areas seem to be, first of all, easier to find. And when I look closer at them, there was a lot of greenery around the rocks and the trees that I hadn't noticed before that wasn't anywhere else. So you can just kind of take into these things, the little anomalies that you didn't notice the first time you were here. But each time I came back, I found these energetic places easier to find. Anyway, so back to this first one. When I got adjusted in the first one, I thought, well, it's my habit to exchange my energy with that area. If I consider myself a light worker, my job is to plant light here. So that's what I was doing. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw, well, there was another one similar, but it seemed a little bit higher. So I thought I'd move over to that. And as I was taking that energy in, I spotted one more spot right against the mountain where these 3 boulders kind of came out and formed this little area within it. So I went to investigate that, and the boulder on the left-hand side was narrow enough for me to get over and a little higher than my inseam, so I could get up and over it. And when I did, I stood there and, planted my light like I do, looked off into the distance, and I can see the parking lot, and the little people looked like little ants way back there. But unless you knew where I was, you had no idea. So after I was finished with that, I sat down, leaned up against the mountain, the only thing between me and it, the dried brushes that's there. So I was listening to music on my ear pods. I was having some water and some grapes. And once I finished my refreshment and put them back in my knapsack, the music stopped. I couldn't understand what was going on. So I was carrying my phone in my back pocket. So when I leaned forward to get my phone out and I pulled it up, I could see the power went off. Well, that doesn't make any sense. It was fully charged when I left the car. Nonetheless, it has a Mophie around it, so battery power should not be an issue. So while I'm trying to fire it up again, I feel a breeze from behind me. And when I turn around, whatever I was leaning against is gone. And now there's an opening that when I stand up is taller than I am. I can see from where this is, there's like a little rise where I am, and then it seems to go down into the dark. And as my eyes started to adjust to whatever I'm seeing, it looks like there's somebody down there. And the moment that thought came in my head, someone asks me, do I wish to see Telos? So you get a little surge of anxiety and excitement in you, but oh, yes, I came here to find things. And it wasn't that I wasn't lost on the fact that Saint Germain had come out of these woods back in the 30s and handed a lot of information to Guy Ballard, enough for him to write, I don't know, 10, 12 books, whatever it was. So I was asking for some type of contact. Look, if there are ascended masters wandering the woods out here, that's what I'm here to find. It's just me, guys, just me. No one else has to know. So let's see what happens. Now, Telos wasn't on my radar. In fact, the only time I knew about Telos was when I arrived into town that day or that week. I had seen it on the cover of a book. Other than that, I had no understanding of what Telos was. I certainly did know about Lemurians in past life regression work I had done, and my initial interest was in Atlantis and Atlantean things. Well, you can't learn about Atlantis without at least hearing Lemurians mentioned in the explanations. So anyway, I started to make my way down, and from where I was standing initially, it looked like there was an adult-sized individual kind of down maybe 30 yards from where I was. And as I started to make my way down, I could see that this person was not my size. They were taller than me by at least a head. They were wearing this white outfit that he had these colored ribbons. And I don't know, to this day, I think they were either indicative of some rank that he held, or maybe that's your version of Lemurian bling. This is how we dress things up here. His demeanor, though, was his physicality was flawless. That's the one word that comes out of this that just struck me. It didn't look like their face had any signs of kind of aging or anything. But later, it'll occur to me that these beings have already crossed into crystalline form. These are what light beings actually look like. You get to choose your avatar and what it's going to look like and how long it lasts. That's totally up to you. But they are not these carbon forms that we are. So there's a couple of realities that are sinking in now. First of all, I am well aware that Earth is on her own course in raising her consciousness. She is in a cosmic spiral that has nothing to do with humanity's kumbaya together. Her vibration is rising, and that's what we're all reacting to. Some of us are just more aware than others, but it is taking place whether we're paying attention or not. The closer it gets to that, the thinner the veil seems to get, the easier it is for us to kind of see it. But our vibration is rising at the same time, which helps us to experience the things that are also vibrating at those levels. So when we're hearing stories of people that have had these extraordinary experiences, just like yours, here is where things are getting unwrapped. And we're finally putting some form to these ideas we've had before, and we're finding people in environments where we can have these conversations now, and they're not taboo anymore. The thing was, when I had my first experience, after the second experience I had, Telos was first, interactions with light beings was second. After that second one, when that happened, that's when it occurred to me that somebody was talking about disclosure and what the new efforts are going to be. And in my little head, I'm thinking, how can anyone stop anybody else from having these multidimensional experiences? You can't. So if I'm having them, I'm certain I am not the only one. And in the process of my story kind of making its way out, it was never meant when I got out of Telos to tell the story to tell the story. It was looking for freaking touchstones that could help me understand what just happened. So as the story's gotten out, I've found more people like you, like me, like lots of others, especially that have shown up in the last month that have had extraordinary experiences and just tucked it away. Because when they tried to talk about it before, they were either ridiculed or they didn't understand it enough themselves, or they were freaked out by the process, because there was certainly some negative influence here that was trying to, take advantage of their last kind of vestiges of power. All of that is gone. Look, where we're going, we all know we're connected to one another there. We talk about it here, but we know that there. And so we don't pay too much attention to all of the white noise going on around us, because that's what's kind of kept us ignorant from all this other stuff that's unfolding as it goes on. These energetic places, like I had suggested before, aren't just in spaces that are more well known, like Shasta and Sedona and Glastonbury. And there's lots of places we've heard of, Egypt. I'm telling you that I've traveled around now, and in other places in the domestic United States, I've found these energetic places as well. To me, it's just more evidence that these places are being preconditioned, because we're not through with all the catastrophic stuff that's going on the planet. Look around you. I hadn't really been aware of the extent of earthquake, tremors, and whatnot until 2 years ago. And I don't know why my attention got on it then. Now, I can tell you that between then and now, the activity has increased substantially because of solar influence that's coming at us, and new proton plasma that's coming from the sun that's affecting the earth. I have now a frame of reference, because when I started looking at it a couple of years ago, I was just curious because it just seemed like there was more than one earthquake going on the planet. When I started to look a couple of years ago, there were like 150 of them a day all over the planet. So when you start to understand the tectonic plates and where these things land and why it makes sense, as I've been following this and watching the rise in sunspot maximum, because we're in the middle of it now, that is the phenomenon that's triggering all the stuff that's going on Earth. So all the seismic activities, volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, and all, look at the flooding. We have not been immune from any of it yet. Places that have never seen this kind of activity before are having severe weather reactions. And that's because Earth is shifting into her new level. And when this energy hits her, she's just like a capacitor, not really unlike us human beings. We take in energy and it has to be expressed somehow. That's what's taking place here now. So where I was used to seeing maybe 150 earthquakes on the planet a day, we're seeing those types of things in swarms within a day. 150 of them at a time in places like Southern California, just off the course of Northern America. And then over in Japan, holy cow, this isn't just a domestic United States thing that we're looking at, although that seems to be our frame of reference. This is taking on a whole different life on the globe. And we aren't that far away from where we're actually overdue from the planet actually pole flipping. The last things, there's a couple of really wonderful like space weather resources to watch. One of them is called Suspicious Observers. And Ben Davidson does a really great job over there. He seems to be the one that is really more on top of not just the idea of this solar flip, He's had plenty of illustrations that have demonstrated how this is going to work and approximately when. And as I've already said, we're overdue. So, what's going to take place next answers a lot of questions if you see things kind of from my perspective. There's a reason why inner Earth cities were reintroduced, and not probably just to me. Well, I'm the only one I've heard so far. But if you recall when Lemuria and Atlantis sunk, if you understand and believe that that phenomena took place, land masses changed. Land masses changed from the time that that took place until then. They're about to change again. So we really don't know where on the planet these land masses are going to end up. I totally expect that the Hawaiian Islands, which was part of Lemuria before, is going to kind of reemerge. And it won't just be the peaks of those islands anymore. That landmass is going to come back. But we won't know any of that yet. Even to speculate on it is kind of foolish, in my opinion, because I just don't know where the land masses are going to be. However, having said that, I do know that a lot of these places like Sedona and Shasta and Egypt and Greenland, and there are lots of places on the planet that are considered golden tie allotments. These areas are predisposed to these higher vibrations and frequencies already. And if you listen to the stories of some of the people, especially those that have been drawn there over the last 4 or 5 years, they went there not understanding what drew them there. Well, there were 2 reasons why you were drawn there. One, initially, a lot of the light workers were sent there to help clear those spaces and raise the vibrations so that it would be ready for the next ones to follow, looking for something that they didn't really understand, but energetically, I feel it. That was their job, to prep these areas. I've heard about people that left things behind here to move to Hawaii under circumstances that shouldn't be that simple. And within 6 months, the transition was made, and there they were. You can't really look at that without thinking that there's no coincidence and that these people were sent there for a reason. There's more and more of that activity that I hear about. Even now, it's rising. The new people that have come up over the last 4 weeks are talking about these opportunities they've had to travel around the world, and they've been doing work. They didn't know what they were doing. They knew that they were doing some energetic work, but if you ask them to describe the nature of it, they really can't explain that any more than I can. I just know that it feels good when I'm there and there's some type of exchange, and I feel as though in that exchange, I've left something behind for someone to find, and I picked up something that I was supposed to pick up. It's more and more important for us to articulate where these places are so that when this shift in consciousness finally arrives, and it's freaking imminent, it's going to be important to let as many people know as get it. There are still those that, because we have been provided with these sovereign beings and we have free will, not everyone wants to choose to ascend here to New Earth. And that's just fine. I send them love and light. Here's the thing. New Earth doesn't support frequencies lower than 4th D. And so all that 3D, that's going in a different direction. And at first, when I was trying to understand how that would physically work, it was my impression that Earth, this orb, is going through a membrane. And as she passes through that, these are the higher frequencies on this side. These are the lower frequencies. Well, once she gets to just about 51%, then the rest of it just kind of pops. And New Earth and all of what was left with 3rd dimensional was entropy. So that was kind of the mindset I had for a while, until recently I heard somebody put it a lot more intelligently. And she described the process, because we talked about multiple timelines, like dual timelines right now, right? Kind of going in this direction. So when she suggested that Earth's split into these 2 things, were more like a cell undergoing mitosis. So here, look, 4th dimension, 3rd dimension. Which one do you choose? Do you want to stay in this lower vibration? Great. Earth is eventually going to entropy away, so you can stay here and play out your 3D lessons if that's your choice. But this, oh, we're on to higher frequencies and there's no going back.
Now getting back to Alex, um, now, so you're going through this corridor from the portal, um, and so how long from going through the portal to ending up in Talos? What did it take long?
Minutes,
Minutes.
minutes. No. Um, Once I get close to Alex and we have our little exchange, he started by saying, "You can call me Alex." And that's when I said, "Well, that'll be easy to remember. That's my son's name." And he replied with, "Yeah, we know about your son, Alex. Just follow me." I can glean out of this circumstance that this is an old lava tube. Here's what we're going in. And it totally makes sense to me underneath the mountain. There's tons of lava tubes that are there. This is just one that they chose for accessing the surface today. Because I can't tell you that this is in the same spot all the time. Even when I've gone back to find this spot where I found the portal, I have trouble finding it again. But I've been led and guided to show other people a place nearby that actually looks like a door to Telos. Anyhow, as we're making our way down this incline, I can start to see light coming from in front of us. And Alex is explaining the nature of Telos, how many levels it has, who the king and queen are, what the council is. And as we get closer to the bottom of this area, I look behind me to see where we'd come from. And there's no light behind us. So whatever I came through, there's no evidence of where I just was. My boots are absolutely on the ground. I am not in a meditative state. I'm here to experience another level of physicality. It just happens to be fourth dimensional. And apparently I match the frequency. So when we enter this area, I call it a staging area because I'm not quite sure what else to call it. It's pretty big, well lit. There are other tunnels in front of us, 5 of them, it seems. But over next to me to the left is this platform. It's probably 6 foot by 6 foot, and it looks like it has what would appear to be like bucket seats on top of it. No console or anything, just this. There's another one over there a little bit further, and there's another one over on this side. Well, while I'm taking all this in, Alex has made his way into the opposite side seat and indicates for me to sit next to him. And as soon as my butt hits this thing, it levitates and off we go into, I think it was the middle lava tube across from us. And again, he's telling me about Telos and what to expect here. And in the meantime, I'm just taking it all in. And as we get closer, this last tube wasn't as long, but when the light started to come in from the opposite side, you could see that this tube was lined with crystals. And every inch further you took, the light refraction changed. And it was like you were in a kaleidoscope, and I never wanted it to end because it was so freaking fascinating. But as soon as we got wherever we were getting and this opening opened up, we are on the first level of Telos. And so this craft, like a hovercraft, comes up, and we're looking at Telos like these cityscape views that you've seen in pictures. I can see the first level just like this. It's circular in orientation. There's a huge white pyramid in the middle of it. All of the other buildings around it are crystalline. I can't see whatever the top of this is. If I think I'm underground, I'm thinking that I'm in some kind of a huge cave. I can't see wherever the peak of this is. And I also can't see any source of light. It's not like there's the light is streaming in through some hole. No, but this place is lit up like daylight, and no one's casting any shadows. So I got a lot of questions about how all this works. As we are coming back down to level and kind of hovering over wherever we're going to next, I can see pods of a couple people here, three people over there as we're going by. And as I do, as I look these five or six people in the face I made eye contact with, it's like I knew them. And more importantly, they knew me. It just felt like I was in a place I'd been here before, and it was just I was welcoming back home. Well, and then we find ourselves on the third level. There are five, and he explains what the others are. And I won't go into detail on that because we can do that any day. But I am in the third level where they have their hydroponic gardens. Here is where they grow the food for their entire population. And I point this out because I'm looking at what he described in like 7 acres we're looking over. And the technology was incredible. Their water is infused with crystal. There's very little dirt that's used whatsoever because it's not necessary. And the process tends to propagate the growing cycles, so it grows faster. Still, I had questions. My understanding is that when the fall took place and Lemuria sunk, that preparations were made in Shasta for 2 million. Well, it sunk so quickly that only 25,000 made it. But over time, the population had grown to 1.2, 1.5, whatever the number we had shared. Now, I'm also under the impression, as of last year, in whatever form they're in, there are more like 4.8 million Lemurians on the planet in some form right now here to assist with the shifting process. I had always wondered how in the world does that feed, let's just say, 1.5 million people? How does it do that? I needed to understand better because I hadn't really put this into perspective then, that their bodies is that crystalline form I was suggesting to you. These are light bodies. They're different than our carbon forms, right? Yes, our carbon forms require nourishment because that's how they work. We need to feed this, and then there's also the stuff we have to just get rid of when we're done with it. That's not how they're engineered. They eat because they enjoy eating, not because their beings are dependent on it. Well, that's a whole new kettle of fish, isn't it? I didn't understand that, but I do now. And that's why it's important for us to embrace the ideas that we have been going through cellular changes for decades now. Not just humans, every sentient life form on the planet is adjusting now to higher frequencies and greater light. We are being engineered from the inside out to take that new crystalline form when Earth hits her new spot. And if you want to believe what I'm telling you, I know that within this incarnation of mine, the shift is going to take place. And that's why I'm here to assist with it. I'm not a spring chicken. And if you look at this solar maximum cycle we're in, if you ask me, my friend, sometime within the next 18 months, because solar maximum is supposed to last into 2026, we're going to see the solar flare phenomenon take place that's going to finally flip Earth's poles and change the consciousness of her all at the same time. So what we've been trying to describe to everybody else is get yourselves ready. Make sure that your frequency is high and keep it there, because that's what's going to determine whether you're going to New Earth or not in the end. You can't fake your frequency. You either got it or you don't. So those of us that are willing to talk about it, here's the reason why. Because we believe that everybody should be interested in going where we're all going. But man, until 4 years ago, I had no conception of it, Jan.
That's amazing. Could you tell us the facial features of Alex? What color of hair did he have? The eyes?
Yeah. He had long blonde hair and his eyes were blue. Now, I can't say that wasn't uniform throughout the place because I don't want to say they all look like Scandinavian knockoffs, but this guy did. And it's funny, it would take me a few months after my trip to Telos for somebody whose family has lived there. He's Native American, and his family has generations on the mountain. When he was the one who said, "Well, you know why I invited you in?" I said, "No, can you tell me why?" He goes, "Because you're one of them." Oh, no, that had not occurred to me. So let's go find another little past life regression that can explain that. And, oh, yes, I spent time in Lemuria. I spent time in Telos. And those aren't the only places. So when I say these things, I hope that the others that are listening understand that they have also had other incarnations here. Really, whoever listens to this, I hope you believe in the idea of reincarnation because you've had lots of other lives. And we're all counting on whatever expertise you had and the lessons you learned to kind of help the collective through whatever we're going to go through next. Because none of the rest of us were on your journey. And none of the rest of us learned your particular lessons. We just know that once this is all done, all of our Akashic records all meld together for the collective. So thank you for the shitty lessons you had to learn, Jan, on my behalf. And you're welcome for the ones I had to learn. So
You
let's take us back here. I'll get you out of the third floor because there's one part of this that's still left, and it's the most important part. We leave the third level and come back to the main level. And when we had come into the area, I had noticed this circular building kind of on the front of the entire upper level. It stood out to me because it was round. Well, that's where we came back. So this hovercraft kind of landed near this building. And when we got close to it, the entrance was the equivalent of like a French door. So it's as wide as two doors. But this was made by a series of crystal panels that turned it into this circular thing. And on the panels on either side of it, I saw some codes that looked really familiar to me. When I first come into town and spent Sunday exploring the shops on the main street, there was one there called Blue Star Child Gallery, run by this lovely little Japanese woman who's gifted in a lot of ways. And she has this gift where she had been translating light codes that she had been given to illustrate for the rest of us to understand what the new angelic blueprint looks like, what new earth looks like. These things, Jan, were 3 feet wide and 10 feet tall. She hand draws them and they take months. And then she goes back and colors them, but she uses no rulers, no curvature tools. And yet, when you see this thing, it's perfectly symmetrical from this side to this one. I don't know how she does it, but it's astounding. These are the things that she's done, that she's been guided to do. And they were, like I said, light codes provided for the rest of us. She's got a whole playful side where she loves rabbits and how she plays that out in her illustrations. Entirely different, but nonetheless powerful. She had these, she's got 1, 2, 3 rooms in this space that she's got, and the last one is like a small one. You would think that originally this was the office in the back. Well, she doesn't use it for that. She's turned it into a meditation room, so it's like 8 by 8. And she has 5 of these huge codes in this room. Well, as I was leaving the day that I spent some time in there, the code on the right-hand side, when you enter that's the council chamber in Telos, is the one to the right side of the door in her space. And the one on the left-hand side matches the one I saw on the left entry into Telos. It's the council chambers. So once I saw that and I remarked on it, I said, "Alex, those things look familiar to me." He said, "Yeah, those are Harukos, and they're accurate. That's why we inscribed them here." So as we moved into the space, it's the only place I really seen anything wood, because the table in the center of the room is round and it's wooden, it's got beautifully, encrusted crystals and whatnot in it, but there's 13 chairs around this table. What I'm noticing more than the table is that when you come into the space, you feel something energetically changing. And it's almost like, think about the best hug you've ever had. And that sensation is like pressing into my heart core the entire time I'm in the space. So you're distracted by what feels like something you're almost physically feeling like it's just a hug that keeps touching you while you're here. So I can only imagine that if this is the room where decisions are made, here's where you soften up everybody before the decisions have to be made. While I'm comprehending whatever's taking place, 5 more people now are entering the room. And I can tell based on illustrations I've seen, which don't do him justice, Adama is in the center. He's probably a foot taller than the others. And then there are 4 feminine, female beings that came in with him. They pointed to a seat for me to take a spot, and then 3 of them sat on this side, 3 of them sat on this side. And progressively, they each spent a couple minutes explaining who they were and what they did. Now, I remember Alex because he's been my tour guide, and I recognized Dama, so I know who he is. But the rest of them, I'll only remember the name of the woman at the very beginning of the table, because from this point on, it seems like she's going to chair the meeting. She's the one who's speaking. And she begins by explaining that the reason I've been asked to come is that the Lemurians and the council have also met. And they sense that this shift is imminent as well. And they want humanity to know they're here, that they have technologies that they're interested in sharing with us once our vibration matches theirs. That's the only thing they're holding out for. So my heart leapt. Somehow over the last 6 months, I had been drawn to the same conclusion. And in my heart, winter solstice of 2020 seemed like a damn good target, understanding that the reset of all these cosmic cycles took place in 2012. Okay, there was enough time now for our entire solar system to find its way into this new ion field coming out of the central sun. So whatever elevated photon energy is coming our way, here's where it's coming from. So this whole idea of some solar phenomenon hitting Earth and expanding something totally makes scientific sense to me, because it was science that pointed out in the early 60s that this band was there. So here we are entering that phase. I see it, they see it. Now they're going to explain why I'm here. And the first reason they gave me is they said, we can see that you can hold 5th dimensional awareness. Well, I always thought that, we always like to think that we can think at that level, but now I know that there are discerning levels, that there are 2 perspectives I always have when I see a condition. I see my 3rd dimensional reflex that kicks in with all my emotions like all the rest of you. And then there's this higher elevated intelligence way of looking at things that help you tune out all the crappy white noise that's just a distraction in order for you to focus on what's really important. So, okay, thanks. I appreciate that validation. The second reason that she said, we understand you're the protector of Gaia and we've been looking for you. Well, I had heard that phrase in an ayahuasca journey 2 years earlier, where that's what Mother Ayahuasca had told me I was. I didn't know what it was, didn't even hear the phrase until Shyama mentions it during this little endeavor. The last reason, more lined up with, I must have been Lemurian before, because when it comes time for this reunification of inner Earth and the surface, I was asked to be an emissary. Well, if I understand the way that things are now, I incarnated for that very purpose. That really, in order for us to affect any change, if humanity was considered hands off by all this higher intelligence so that we would evolve on our own, in my opinion, that all changed in the 40s after we had discovered atomic power and weaponized it. And when we demonstrated what we could do when we dropped it on Hiroshima, that we, as carbon-based beings here for 80 to 100 years, just demonstrated how we could damage a cosmic asset. The Earth is not ours. And so to destroy it in that way made no sense whatsoever. So here's where I could tell that higher influences was going to start to help. Now, they still can't help directly because they can't enter this place. But what can? Oh, we can incarnate here and somehow along our journey, remember who we are, hopefully wake up fast enough so that we can answer this clarion call of whatever is taking place here so that we can assist in the shift that's taking place. That's how I feel where we are. And so, it all resonated with me. So when they asked at the end if I would consider, I stammered a little bit and then kind of spit it out. Oh, well, it would be my honor. Well, at that point, the meeting was over. Yeah, we were going to sit here and discuss anything else. They got their answer. We're good. Off we go. So they stood up and bowed in my direction. And then Alex and I made our way back out, hopped back on the hovercraft and made our way back to that initial staging area. And here's when I hadn't said much of anything. I really would just want to pay attention and take it all in. But I did have two questions. One, can I tell anybody I was here? And Alex kind of laughed and he said, we want you to tell everyone we're here. We want everyone to know we're here. This isn't a legend. There's a reason why we all went underground when we went underground. And if you see some of the signs that are going on now, we suspect that many more of you are going to need to find these places after this shift. We're not done with catastrophic stuff either. So just like we went underground, this area is going to be available for those of you that are vibrating, because we all promised you'd be able to come to inner earth as well. That opportunity is just about going to be presented to you. And as exciting as it is for us to think we get to go there, believe me, they're just excited to be back on the surface from where they had been before. The second question I had was, do I get to return? And he kind of smiled at me. He said, yeah, you'll get to return before the shift. And that was about as definite as he would give me. Of course, it wasn't enough for me, but since then, I've certainly had plenty of interactions with them. What I'm excited to see, because what I've been told is that there's going to be a greater amount of contact taking place between the Lemurians, and not just the Lemurians. All of inner earth beings are reaching out to the surface because it's just that time. And I hope that we can achieve a level where people that are unaware of what's about to take place, although what's going on right now, again, don't face it with the idea that there's something to be afraid of immediately. Believe me, if I could do anything, it would be to tell you that that's exactly the opposite of the help that's coming now. Is there dark energy you're going to hear about? Yeah, you are. And I can't rule out the people that have had interactions with secret space programs and abductions. I can't speak to that myself because that has not been my experience. But I can tell you, in the time that I've been in this community, that even though I might have doubted it, I've met a couple people, and I'll mention Tony Rodriguez's name in particular. I'd heard Tony's story, and it's not a pleasant one to hear until I got to kind of see places where Tony had been, and he pointed to what had happened. I can't really deny that happened anymore. Yeah, not every experience that all of us that have had dimensionally has been pleasant. I believe, however, that we're past the point where a new negative energies are being influenced. But again, we're still dealing with a lot of residue left over. And, Tony's just one of those guys. Thank God he kind of saw beyond it and now can help others by talking about his story. But I can see where it's easy to get hung up listening to those stories because you can't take that away from those people. It happened to them. What I can tell you looking forward is that my hope and wish for the rest of you, because we're going to have these experiences, you might as well get ready for them, are going to be benevolent. I have an interesting awareness that kind of developed over the last couple of years. Since the time I met Dave Wallace, if you know who Dave is, Dave had off-planet experiences and illustrated his 3 days off when he arrived. I see myself as a bridge. I have connections and relationships with inner Earth beings, but I'm also here to connect with those that are off planet. So see where a lot of us, not just me, are going to serve as the bridge in between all that. Because honest to God, guys, we're not just connected to the inner Earth beings that have been here a lot longer than we have. Look, we have star families that are also here coming to assist, and we just need to get an awareness of it. Have we been told about any of this before? Have we been trained about it? Have we been taught about any of it? Absolutely not. But that doesn't make it not true. Because I'm here to tell you that through my experiences, this is what I'm experiencing. And I've had just as many experiences with flashing lights in the sky that I've asked for as much as I've had inner Earth experiences. So again, I keep waiting to hear stories from the others when I hear about increasing contact, not just new orbs showing up in my field.
You talked briefly about Adama. So for my listeners, can you tell us who Adama is and what he looks like?
Yeah. Well, it's hard. Who I saw as Adama is the head priest in Telos. And there is a council of 13. So let me explain the council of 13, because at first, even I thought Adama's that 13th body. He's the decision maker. No, that's not true. The council of 13 is actually made up of 12 people. It's actually 6 sets of twin flames. And Adama and his twin flame, he is the chief priest. The 13th place is held by the king and queen. They're the 13th seat in the council, and they vote as one unit in the event that they need to vote. But look, it's Telos. The reason why the council is the council and what the responsibilities are isn't to talk about any types of disputes here. Their job is to assist in the spiritual enlightenment of everybody here. They're on the tribe, or they're on the council because of their level of metaphysical advancement. That's it. They're here to help everybody achieve higher levels and help them with their evolution.
You talked about Telos having different layers. I know Aurelia Louise Jones in her book talks about having multiple layers. Do you know how many layers in total they have?
Yes, there are 5. The first level is the top level, and that's where most people live. That's where there's most of the temples are on the first level. The second level is some more living accommodations, but then you're getting into areas where there's some manufacturing that takes place, some education that's done. That's all done on the second level. The third level is primarily these hydroponic gardens where their food is raised. And the fourth level is a combination of more hydroponic gardens and then more areas that are, I would consider them outdoorsy, lakes, parks, forests, that type of thing. And then the fifth level is an abundance of what I just described and lots of plant, flora, fauna, animal life. Some has been on the surface, some has not. And so when this reintegration takes place, many of these things will emerge again, and then we'll be invited to be able to visit these places as well. And now, when I talk about Telos the way that I do, because I am waiting to return and explore it in greater detail, let me remind you that Telos is not the only inner Earth city that we will be able to visit. According to what I understand, in all of Agartha, there are 120 of these. They're not all Lemurian, they're not all Atlantean. There are going to be other life forms that we're unfamiliar with that have also been here a lot longer than we have, but here to assist from higher dimensional spaces to help the Earth.
Wow. There's a lot of stories of like online videos of like UFOs coming into Mount Shasta lights. I've seen them. Are you aware if like Alex's people do have starships that they can use?
We didn't, I can't say that we had that discussion. So I can't say we talked about that and here it is. But I'm going to tell you what my observations have been. My first coming to terms with UFOs, UAPs, I like to call them what Dave calls them. These are interstellar conveyances, however they move through space and whatever they call it. The first ones I saw was in Sedona, the March after Telos. I'd been invited to present. This first time I was ever going to talk about my experience. And this one Saturday night, they had some of the UFO tour people there, brought their military grade goggles, and we're all going to look. I had met one of the guides Friday night, and Michael had said, "Oh yeah, you're invited to come with us Saturday, and we're all going to go, looking for UFOs." He goes, "It'll be like shooting fish in a barrel." And I've never been there before, so of course I'm thinking, "Yeah, right." Well, he was right. What I got to see, there was unmistakably so many craft moving in different directions. These were not satellites moving because they were all moving at different places, in different directions, and at different velocities. It was unmistakable. So there was a point at which, when I returned to Shasta the following year, it's a great place to stargaze as well. There's no light pollution at the top of that mountain, and at almost 9,000 feet, while you get to see the Milky Way like the Milky Way. But there are some conditions that you recognize where it's more ideal as opposed to not. And those nights would be when it's a new moon. So when there's no full moon to take up your attention from the Milky Way, you see the Milky Way in all its glory. But on those nights when it is a full moon, and that was a couple weeks in, I'd finally gotten to that night. This is the night that I thought, well, you know what? They talk about lots of UFO activity over the mountain. So I'm going to turn my chair around and let's look this way tonight. So it was a little before 11 o'clock. And as I was looking back, I had already seen a couple shooting stars. Really cool, moving kind of this way. I was looking at the mountain right in front of me, and Polaris, the North Star, was right over her. Well, one of the last, what I thought were shooting stars, came from almost where Polaris was and shot almost straight down at the mountain and disappeared for like a second. And then it went that way. Okay, that is not a shooting star. And as soon as I saw that, I'm just hoping, did somebody else see that? And some 2 cars down, I hear somebody say, "Did you see that?" Yes, I did. Thank you very much. So there's no question in my mind there is UFO activity there. I certainly have come to terms with the lenticular clouds, we've been told. I can show you more pictures of craft, those kind of ships over the mountain. And it associates itself when you are there and watch the activity. You can see stuff that looks like it's going in and out of the mountains. So in my opinion, of course it is. I can't say that it's Lemurians coming and going, but I can't say that it's not. To me, this is other stellar traffic that's coming to visit because we've had other life forms here. Part of what Dave Wallace and I have kind of gleaned out of this, and it's not just us, we're also being visited by other extraterrestrial beings that we are unfamiliar with. So I want to distinguish between ultra terrestrials, those beings we know from other places, and extraterrestrials, the ones we don't know. Dave's had visitors in his home from beings that are here, it appears, to just kind of scout out the place. They have taken things from his apartment as artifacts, replaced some of them with other things, but it's almost gotten comical. To me and to Dave, these are advanced teams for those civilizations. And they're coming here just like we want to go so we can tell people what to expect when they get here. That's what we believe is taking place. They're here to find out what it's like to be here on Earth in this particular density and what the humans around us are all behaving like. And they chose Dave because Dave already has a relationship with off-planet, beyond Earth sentience. So this is kind of a safe zone for them. They know that interactions have taken place with this guy, so it's kind of safe for us to be here. I'll leave that for Dave to tell the story because he tells it better, and it's not really my story to tell. However, the stuff took place, and there were other anomalies that took place while they were there in the space, and only Dave can really tell it best. So the bottom line is there are other beings that are here scouting out Earth for the day that we're ready to be able to have those types of contact interactions, but they're not far away.
Talk briefly about the huge pyramid underground, the white one. Do you know its purpose, what's it made of?
I don't know what it's made of, but I can tell you it holds approximately 10,000 people. It was meant to be kind of the social area. It's not that they don't have other temples around there, but this particular one has a capstone that was given to them by Venus. And I didn't understand the nature of it until after my visit, because the day I was there, it was white. I was unaware. The capstone changes color depending on the day of the week. I had gotten to know Diane Robbins, who lives in Shasta and has written 3 or 4 books on the topics. And it was after a couple of interviews I did that she had sent me a list of something that she had never written any of her books. And she said, I forgot to note this, and you might find it interesting. Depending on the day of the week, that determines the color of the capstone. So it was white, and that's what it would have been on Sunday. Had I been there on a Wednesday, it would have been green or emerald. Had I been there on Thursday, it would have been violet. There is a light frequency that the capstone picks up from the cosmos. And when it does, it changes that color and vibrates throughout the collective. And so the reason I understand I saw him dressed in white that day is it was Sunday. Had I been there on another day, he would have been dressed differently. And now that, well, I put all this together before. The next year, when I went back to revisit the portal to just see if it was still there, and things went the way I hoped they would, it was earlier in May, so the road wasn't open yet. I had to hike all the way up 3.5 miles to get there. But anyway, I did have another interaction at the entryway with Shyama, the woman who had kind of led chaired that last meeting. The day that I went back up there to visit, I could see the energetic outline of that portal that I was in. And while I was there, I could see her on the other side. And my first thought when I saw her was, well, you're this close. Why don't you step out? And she says, I can't. I'd have to drop my vibration to do that. And I knew that immediately when she said that. And I said, well, God, yeah, I guess who would do that? And she said, well, you did. Well, yeah, I guess I did. Anyway, I told you that story because the day that I saw her, I returned there on a Wednesday, and she was wearing this dress looked like a green hologram. It was crazy in the way that it detected the light, but it was definitely green that day. So take it for what it's worth. There is something to all of this.
Fascinating. Are you aware if they have a financial system or if they have to work?
The collect there Before I answer that, there's a really wonderful resource. I had heard a couple of months after the first interview, I had been asked if I knew a woman named Sharula Dux. Have you ever heard the name? I didn't either. Well, Sharula is allegedly the daughter of King and the king and queen of Telos. She's a Lemurian princess. And in the 80s, she spent time on the surface, spent some time in Shasta, spent some time in the Sedona area, and then she and her twin flame apparently lived in Albuquerque or some in New Mexico for a while. So from the late 80s through the 90s until in either 2005 or 2007, when she just dropped off the radar again, she was here on the surface helping people come to terms with the Lemurians and what life in Telos is like. She befriended Diane Robbins. And Diane recorded on a tape recorder in 1993 the last 2-hour presentation Sharula Dux had ever done. When I had been told about it, Rob Potter, who's a guy who has an event in Shasta every year, had asked me, have you ever heard of her? And when I found it, somebody had found the recording that had been digitized, but they chopped it up into 10, 12-minute segments, I guess, so they'd feel it was more palatable for people to listen to. So when I started to listen to it, honestly, I wasn't that engaged in the content and I didn't really understand what I was doing. It's 3 months after Telos, so this hasn't really sunk in. However, in a year or so, it will, because all this is going to come up again. Somebody else from out of nowhere is going to show up at Diane Robbins' place and explaining that they're Lemurians and they've been instructed to kind of show up and communicate with Diane. So Diane tells me about this individual, and now the whole Sharula thing comes up again. I asked Diane for permission because whoever had had it and chopped it up had done so 15 years ago. I said, is it possible for me to take that and stitch it all back together? Let me take some of the inner earth and Telos images I've got, and I'll put it all together and let's throw it out there for people to consider. Because now that I've listened to it, here is freaking Lemurian history that other people need to hear. So if you want to hear about the conditions in Telos, do yourself a favor, go to my channel and find the Sharula Dux 2-hour dissertation and listen to it. You will hear what life in Telos was like, what family life is like, what the idea of what the collective provides. Yes, they have jobs, but it's what you do collectively and what you would do in any community collectively, just keep the place ready. Some of us work on the food that is prepared and distributed. No one pays for it. Somebody clothes us and takes care of the collective. Your place where you live is a process of your own construct. Look, these are crystalline places. So you can make it the way you want and manifest your living conditions inside of it the way that you wish. And you're not locked into this place. There's a reason why I mentioned there are other inner earth communities underneath the planet in this next dimension, and they're all available for you to all visit as frequently and as long as you wish. You don't have to worry about booking an Airbnb. You don't have to worry about finding a hotel room. These places are available wherever we go, and the collective provides it welcomely. We find out whatever it is because each one of us carries a unique gift, do we not? Yes. And somewhere in the fabric of this tribe I'm in, my purpose serves perfectly what others don't. So when that particular instance comes forward, we know who gets pushed forward out of the crowd. The person that was designed to do this. And it wasn't, though, that I needed to teach it to Jan, because we have that person who can do that. It wasn't for them to teach us. They're already in the tribe. So we kind of got that covered. So now can you appreciate, while all these gifted people with different mastery comes together? Wow, do we have some power? And manifesting from that place, holy cow, watch what we're going to do next. Because the whole appeal of humanity in the first place is that, yes, the Lemurians, as well as the Atlanteans, have some pretty sophisticated technology they wish to share with us. And the reason they're so gung ho on humanity is that they've kind of lost that edge, because they're at a level where, their emotions don't dictate their actions. They absolutely dictate ours, don't they? But they also enable our creativity. Humans, by nature, like to make things better. And so imagine what we can do with their technology and our interest in getting things done. Here is why humanity is not a lost cause. Have we been poor stewards of the planet we've been on? I will have to say yes. However, imagine what we could do if our DNA had been restored back to its original design, unmolested in any way, and watch where that creativity takes humanity on a planet that's no longer affected by the rules of duality. Watch what this happens.
Now, after your meeting with the Dharma, did you leave Telos right away?
Yes, yes. When we got back to the staging area, the next thing I knew after the questions I asked is I was sitting back up in that same spot where I had been leaning before. And it wouldn't be until a couple months after that that I would finally recognize you went through a portal. They opened it, they closed it, and they put you back where they found you. Okay, now that finally resonates with me.
Okay. Now, how long did that entire adventure take you inside Telos?
It took, and I know the answer to that. And here's why. When I left my vehicle, I took a photograph with my phone in the direction I was going to go. So in the future, I would know where I was, and it would also be time stamped. When I got back to the car, took another picture. So again, I would have the timestamp. It felt like I was in there for 3 or 4 hours. I was in there for about an hour and 40 minutes.
Hmm. Okay.
But was there a shift in the timeline? I would definitely say that there was. That I was in a realm where time, yeah, it isn't measured that way linearly. That what it just seemed like I saw a lot, or only have been there the amount of time that back here on the clock would indicate that I was.
You talked about having, well, your entire adventure was, well, they raised your vibration. Now, did you see any physical changes coming out of that adventure?
You know, when I look at myself every day, I really don't have any frame of reference for subtle changes. Although people have said that I look younger. I know in the intro, it just reminded me when somebody else had written that. And when I'd asked to do a bio, my only frame of reference is, what I'd done in my professional life. Well, none of that translates into any of this. So anyway, somebody had done that. And when you had mentioned that I was in there 67 trips around the earth or around the sun, I'm about to turn 71. And I don't, according to them, look like it, sound like it, act like it. Yeah, I see the sense in all that. I just don't feel my age. And when I see the others that I went to school with around me, yeah, either I took really good care of myself or they did not, but something else energetically, in my opinion, Jan, was responsible for that. And I really attribute that more to finding a meditative state. Because once I did, wow, I lost within a 6 month period, and it wasn't my intent to diet or exercise. I wasn't on it at all. Somehow I lost 35 pounds. Somehow my history of high blood pressure went by the wayside. And I've been an athlete and a hockey player most of my life. So, my joints were achy. That's gone too. So you explained to me how at my stage of life, those things have gotten better as opposed to continue to deteriorate and achy. I don't have any of that anymore. So if you're looking for physical changes, I would say that they're probably more associated with a meditative state than it was visiting these multidimensional places. But to me, you had to have this one before you could experience that one.
True. Yeah. Can you get into your, can you talk about your books that are out?
The um, the example was actually the second one I produced. There was another one I did before that because I wanted to self-publish. And in the end, I put color photos, the ones like from the light being exchanges, those were in that book. But because of the platform I used, it was cost prohibitive. I didn't really understand putting books on Amazon and publishing through there. So the example was that. And really, the example was this entire time I've been going through these experiences. So the book is nothing but journal entries from all of the things that have happened. I started to say the most profound things, and I didn't know it was coming from. Really, based on the things that I think I've learned, I don't know where I got that thought. And the more they happen, the more I would write them down because I thought, well, wow, that's so profound. I want to go read that again later. All of a sudden, I found I had a phone full of these things. So when it came time to write the book was just take your journal entries and put them in. Because really, they're in linear timeline anyway. And now, in between these thoughts and things that are coming to you personally, you're having these experiences. You just see the timeline from when this began and where we are today. The question I had when somebody said you could write a book is this stuff continues to happen. At what point do you stop when tomorrow something else might happen? Well, they just encourage me, we'll deal with that when it comes. We think that the time is right for you to start to put this stuff down because other people are having similar experiences, looking for the same touchstones that you claim you're looking for too. Here's where the tribe will find one another.
Let's finish off the interview. Do you have a closing statement to share, or perhaps a final story that you might want to get out?
Really, the one thing that I hope for everybody, and we kind of touched on it, but I want to say it again. If you are open and interested in having these type of contact experiences, I promise you, you will. They are imminent for all of us now. We just had never been prepared for them before. So my hope in all of this is that somehow we can overcome that component of where we're going to freak out first. And I don't know how to get by that. Because I can tell you that the first time I had my multidimensional experiences, I got to admit, they're a little unsettling. You're just in land that you've never been in before. And if you want to take that down a negative path, I can see where it would be easy to navigate yourself there. But I'm here to tell you that this is all benevolent, wonderful help that's here to assist. And they're taking every opportunity to interact with us in any way they can whether it's synchronicity in numbers you keep seeing, whether it's a song you had in your head and all of a sudden you heard it, or whether it's a person who came across your path and all of a sudden there's a familiarity that I can't explain. These things are all being placed in our path now because the veil is being drawn back. And all of these things that have been here for us forever are starting to appear in our physicality because Earth is almost there. All this effort is to prepare us to be there too.
Well, Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for coming on. You're an amazing speaker, and I had an amazing time today, so thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a great.
And to those watching, hope you enjoyed today's interview. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.